We're now up to Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, and the Gemara is asking who is the author of our Mishnah. It cannot be neither the Tanakama of Me'achecha, we'll see the Tanakama of Me'achecha immediately, nor could it be Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, who argues with the Tanakama, Maihi. So the Gemara now on the top of Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Beis is going to bring the Brisa that records the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Me'achecha. The pasuk says in Dvarim Perek Chof Daled, that's in Parshas Kiseitze, it says Lo Sashok Sachir Oni V'Evyon Me'achecha O Migercha Asher Ba'atzcha Bish'arecha. So we emphasize the word Me'achecha. Prat lacherim, and this comes to exclude akum. And then the pasuk says o migercha, and this comes to teach us ger tzedek, that a ger tzedek has the same status as a full-fledged Yisrael, and therefore he's included in the pasuk biyomo titein schoro, etc. Then it says in the pasuk bisharecha, and bisharecha is coming to include a ger toshav, ze ochel nevelos, right? A ger toshav declares in front of a bezin shel Yisrael that he's committed to the sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, but he's allowed to eat nevela. And when the Torah says lagercha asher b'sharecha titaneno, referring to nevela, it's referring to a ger toshav, so he eats nevelos. Ainli ella schar adam. In all these cases, we're talking about withholding payment from a human being, wages that are coming to him for the work he did. But what about renting? Minayin l'rabos behema v'kelim. So we're talking about rental agreements for either utensils or for animals, and the payment of those rental fees has to come in due time. And therefore, Talmud Loma be'artzecha, the pasuk has an extra word be'artzecha, kol shebe'artzecha, to teach me that even if you owe money for a rental of either behema or kelim, then it has to be paid on time. V'kulam ovrim b'chol hashemos halolu. So it means that if payments are withheld, then you violate all these violations, all these prohibitions. We've already seen on Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph that we're talking about the shemos of these surim. In actuality, you can't violate all of these five lavim at the same time. Some apply to Skir Yom, some to Skir Laila. But basically, all these laws apply to withholding wages from a worker who is born Jewish, or he's a ger tzedek or a ger toshav, and withholding rental payments for animals or utensils that were rented. So we have here the pasuk in Dvarim Perek Chof Daled. I mean, we actually quoted the second pasuk, which is pasuk Tesvav. Let's go back for a moment to pasuk Yud Daled, Lo Sashok Sachir Oni V'Evyon Me'achecha O Migercha Asher B'Atzcha B'Sharecha. That's the pasuk we quote. And the next pasuk Tesvav says Biyomo Titein Scharo V'Lo Savo Olav Hashemesh Ki Oni Hu V'Elav Hu Nosi Es Nafsho V'Lo Yikra Alecha El Hashem V'Haya B'Chachet. So again, to summarize the bottom line here, according to the Tanakama, Echad Schar Adam, Echad Schar Behem, Echad Schar Kelim, Yesh Bo Mishum Biyomo Titein Scharo, which is the very next pasuk, pasuk Tesvav, in Dvarim Perek Chof Daled. V'yesh ben baltolin, mishum baltolin pu'ula sacher. Now, baltolin pu'ula sacher that's already the pasuk in Vayikra Yutes in Parshas Kedoshim, and we're going to have to somehow connect the two parshas, the parsha in Kiteitzei in Sefer Dvarim with the parsha in Kedoshim in Sefer Vayikra. That's going to be the Gzera Shava that we'll have coming around the bend, Schir Schir. So all this is according to the Tanakama, and this violation of Baltolin Pu'ulas Sakir is the prohibition against retaining wages, or for that matter, robbing an employee. And if it's a day worker, it doesn't apply to a night worker, etc., as we mentioned before. Now we have the Shita of Yossi Rav Yehuda Ger Toshav Yeshbo Mishum Biyomo Titein Scharo. So in the parsha of Dvarim Chav Daled, Pasuk Tesvav, it says Biyomo Titein Scharo, and that pasuk follows the previous pasuk Yudalid, which mentions Megercha Shebeatzlo B'Sharecha. And we said that B'Sharecha includes a Ger Toshav who eats B'Sharecha, like we give him the Nevela B'Sharecha. So that's as far as Biyomo Titein Scharo, which is the positive command. And keep in mind also that Biyomo Titein Scharo refers to a person who works at night. So on the following day, you have to pay his wages. But V'ein bo mishum lo solin, we don't have that Gzera Shava, that bridge that links us between Kiteitzei in Sefer Dvarim, where the Torah relates to a Ger Toshav, and the parsha in Kedoshim in Sefer Vayikra, where the Torah says, Lo salin pu'ulas sachir ad boker. So here we're talking about a day worker, and this Baltolin does not apply, according to Rabbi Yossi, to a Ger Toshav. And let's go one step further. Behema v'kelev, if you're talking about rental payments for either an animal or utensils, then Abraham Mishum Bal Tashok Bilvad. Ela Mishum Bal Tashok Bilvad. So now this is very interesting because Bal Tashok is written twice. It appears in Dvarim Perchav Dalet, it says Osashok, etc. And that's the same pasuk in which it says Bisharecha. And therefore we include a Ger Toshav, according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, in Lo Sashok, but there's another Lo Sashok in Sefer Vayikra, in Perek Tesvav, Lo Sashok es Reacha, but Reacha is not going to include a Ger Toshav. So we'll see how to work out all these psukim. Mani. So the Gemara now comes back full swing to ask his question on our Mishnah. Does our Mishnah follow the Tanakama V'achicha, Me'achicha, or does it follow Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda? I Tanakama de Me'achecha Kasha Ger Toshav. We're going to get stuck with our Mishnah regarding the prohibition against delaying wages overnight to a Ger Toshav, because that prohibition, even though it's in Sefer Vayikra, but it doesn't apply to a Ger Toshav. The Tanakama says that all the prohibitions that apply to a Jewish worker also apply to a Ger Toshav. So Tanakama puts Ger Toshav in the same status as a regular full-fledged Jew, whereas our Mishnah says that the prohibition of Baltolin in Sefer Vayikra does not apply to a Ger Toshav. So it's impossible to reconcile our Mishnah with the Tanakama, the Brisa of Me'achicha. And Rabbi Yossi, then we're in even deeper trouble. Why? Because Kasha Be'elu V'Kaleb. Whereas our Mishnah says that the prohibition of Baltolin in Sefer Vayikra and biyomo titein scharo in Sefer Dvar both apply to rental agreements for paying for the rental of an animal or a utensil. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, in the Brisa, says that neither of these laws apply to rentals. The only prohibition against rentals is lo sashok. Omar Rava, Rava answers this question. Hai Tana, there's a third Tana, which is reflective of the Tana of our Mishnah, and that's Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. The Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, Echad Schar Adam, so whether or not you're hiring a person, Vechad Schar Behema, Vechad Schar Kelim, or utensils or animals, Yeshbo Mishum Biyomo Titein Scharo. Now, Biyomo Titein Scharo, as we mentioned earlier, is the Pasuk Tesvav, the second of the two Psukim in Dvarim Chav Daled. And that Pasuk, since it follows the previous pasuk that says, "Asher bi'artzecha b'sharecha bi'artzecha" included rental agreements for behema kelim, and b'sharecha included ger toshav. So therefore, we can now include the pasuk of biyomo titein scharo that applies to a night worker. Umishum lo tolim. Now we have the case of a day worker, because lo tolim in Sefer Vayikra. Now this is very interesting because we're going to have the Gzeir Shava of Skir, but if we go back to Sefer Vayikra, it says lo solin pula sacher ala boker, so we're talking about a night worker. Just 1 second. Lo solin now it seems that lo solin applies, it would seem to apply to a night worker. I'm not, that point we'll have to clarify. Ger Toshav, yesh bo mishum biyomo titein scharo, v'ein bo mishum bal tolen. So the Gemara is going to have to analyze, but it comes out anyway. The bottom line is that our Tanakam is identical with Rabbi Shmuel in Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. And with regard to Ger Toshav, on the one hand, we have biyomo titein scharo, which is a pasuk that follows bisharecha, which included ger toshav. But on the other hand, when we go back to Baltolin, which is in Vayikra, there we don't have a ribui for ger toshav. On the contrary, that pasuk starts by saying re'ach, which excludes ger toshav. Now the Gemara is going to analyze the various tanoim. My taima de Tanakama de meachecha. So we're going back to the first Tana of the Brisa, who uses the pasuk meachecha. So on the one hand, he's saying that all Jews are included in these laws of Jewish employees, and it also includes a ger toshav. And again, let's go over this again one more time, rentals of animals and utensils. Because it would seem that all the above are included only in the parsha of lo tolen pula sacher itcha ad boker. And now the Gemara introduces the bridge between the two parashas, between Vayikra and Dvarim. Gomar schir schir. This is the Gzeir Shava. So let's see the Gzeir Shava. We have here Pa'ulas Sachir in Vayikra, and we have V'yomoy Titein Scharo and Lo Sashuk Sachir in Dvarim. So all the laws that are in this section will apply to the other section. So whether you're talking about Ger Toshav paying his wages, if you're talking about rental payments for animals in Kalim, it's all included. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, lo gomer skir skir. He doesn't have the Gzeir Shava skir skir. So therefore, if you find certain lavim that apply in one parish of the Torah to a day worker, they don't apply to the wages of a Ger Toshav, or for that matter, rental agreements of animals and utensils. Frekte Gemara, I don't understand. What did you say about Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the Gomar Sachir, so he doesn't have the Gzeir Shava? But why doesn't he include rental payments, Behema V'Kelim, Bishum Biyomo Titein Schor Nami Nechayev? So in the case of Behema Kelim, rental agreements, he's only in violation of the Iser of retaining the wages, but Biyomo Titein Scharo doesn't seem to be included. And Biyomo Titein Scharo directly follows Osashok Sachir in Dvarim. And since the word Be'artzacha there, in the Pasuk Yudal right before it includes rental payments for animals in Kalim, then all these commandments in the two verses of Yudalad and Tesvav should apply. And he should be liable for delaying payment for night rental until after the next day. So the Gemara answers, Tani Rabbi Chananya. Rabbi Chananya taught in a brisa, Omar Kra, V'lo Savo Olav Hashemesh Ki Onihu. Again, this is in Sefer Dvarim. Right? Biyomo Titein Schar V'lo Savi Olav Hashemesh Ki Onihu. Misha Hein Boim Lidei Anius Vashirus. Only a human being that could become poor or he's wealthy, Yatsu, to exclude Behema V'Kelim Shein Boim Lidei Anius Vashirus. So again, even though Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would apply the entire section in Dvarim to Behema or Kelim for rental agreements, he's forced to limit it for rentals because of this mute of Ki Anihu, Misha Boili De Anius. So Gemara now asks for Tanakama, right? He holds that rental payments for animals at Kalim are subject to all the commandments, even to Lotovo, Lova Shemesh, etc. So what's he going to do with this pasuk of Ki Anihu, which seems to exclude Behema Kalim? And the Gemara answers, Hi, Ki Anihu, Hahumi boy lahaktim oni liyoshi. Torah is teaching me something totally different, that if two people are coming for their wages, two employees, one's poor, one's wealthy, then you give the wages to the poor person. So therefore, we're not using this pasuk, Ki Anihu, to exclude Behema Kalim. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, right? He excluded Behema Kalim. So what's going to be the basis for the halachic principle that you give to the ani before the ashir? Hahu, that law he derives milo sashok sochir ani v'evyon. So you see that ani, who's someone who's poor, is put up front in the pasuk in lo sashok, and therefore, if it's an ashir and ani, you give to the ani first. The Tanakama. So why does the Tanakama need to derive from the Pasuk Anihu that the Ani comes first? Why not derive it from Ani v'Evyon? Lo sashik sochir Ani v'Evyon. Chad laktim Ani li'ashir, v'chad laktim Ani li'Evyon. So we need one pasuk, give wages to the poor, the employee who's poor, if you only have that much money to pay, above the wealthy wage earner. But we need another pasuk to give kedima to ani over evyon. Now let's understand the difference between ani and evyon. Ani is a poor person. Evyon is someone who doesn't even have food to put on the table. But he's used to that desperate situation, so he doesn't suffer that much busha. The ani who has to knock on doors and panel, he suffers busha. And therefore the Torah says, give the ani first and the evyon second. Utsricha. To Iyashmin and Evyon, if you only told me that an ani comes before an Evyon, Mishum Lo Kosif Limitbe, that's because the Evyon is not ashamed. He's used to getting his wages. I mean, he's used to collecting his charity. Aval Osher de Kosif Limitbe. Case of a wealthy man, if he has to demand his wages from his employer, that's very embarrassing for him. Maybe we don't give any kedima to a poor person over a rich person. And if the Torah only informed me that a poor person precedes a wealthy person, the wealthy person really doesn't need these wages so badly. A destitute man who desperately needs the wages, I would say that a poor person does not precede the Evyon. Tzricha, but no, the Chiddush is that the Ani comes first because of the element of Busha. In fact, the Gemara of Tana Didan, I don't understand our autonomy Monefshach. If he accepts the Gzeir Shava of Rabbi Shmuel of Sachir Sochafilu Ger Toshav Nami, then even a Ger Toshav should be included in all the prohibitions. And that's exactly the Tanakh of the Brisa. So why does the Mishnah, in the name of our Tana, say that a Ger Toshav is subject only to the law and the lav of a Schir Laila if he works at night? And lo yolif sachir the behem of a kelim minole. How does the Tana of our Mishnah derive the conclusion that even utensils and animals, the rental agreement, is included in all these lav? We were only able to derive that because there's an equation through the Gzeir Shavah Sachir between the two parshios, meaning from Vayikra to Dvarim, Torah to Vayikra, where it says Liolam Lo Yolef Sachir. So now we're saying that Tanakam of Mishnah does not derive Sachir. So how do we know Behema Kalim? V'shani Hasam the Omikra V'lo Solin Pa'ula Sachir Itcha Araboker. Apparently, the word itcha is superfluous. It's called shepulaso itcha. Any item that's, shall I say, in your hire, meaning it's working for you, even something that's rented, is also included. So a special ribui for behem and kelim. Affecting mori hachi afilu ger toshav nami. Right, even the case of a ger toshav should be subject to all these laws with regard to a day worker. Why does the Tana of Mishnah say that the wages of a ger toshav are subject only to the prohibition of a night worker, not a day worker? Because in the section of the day worker it says reacha, and reacha is to the exclusion of a ger toshav. They're not reacha, so use the same reacha to exclude rentals of utensils and animals. But on the other hand, we have the extra redundant word itcha, which was a ribui, to include rental payments on animals and kelim. So now we're going to get into what we call my rois. We have the ribui vitcha. So my rois l'rabos ben v'kelim l'hotzi get toshav. Why do you choose it that way? Even though it's not reacha, but it could be mamon reacha. But gertoshav ain't b'chlal mamon reacha at all. There's no reacha at all. So now the Gemara says, what about the Tanakama, the Brisa of a Tanakama, the meachecha? That means that a gertoshav is included under the surim that apply to a regular Jew. Is high reacha my ovidle. What do we need the word reacha? Because reacha is not coming to exclude gertoshav, because we have meachecha, and that was a ribui for a gertoshav. Which means that with regard to an Amaleki, let's call it an akum, so then he's excluded. We'll soon see that he's excluded from two Isurim. Amaleki me'achecha nafka. Why don't we derive the exclusion of Amaleki for the word me'achecha? Why do we need a second mute of reacha on top of me'achecha to exclude an Amaleki? And the Gemara answers, Chad lemishrei oshko, v'chad lemishrei gozlo. One is to permit holding back the wages from an Amaleki, and the second is to permit robbery of the property of an Amaleki. Utzricha, we need both. If the Torah had only said you're permitted to steal his property, maybe it's property that he himself stole, or he got it somehow. He got it somehow as a gift, an inheritance. That's called lo tarchle. We're talking about wages after he worked. He's troubled himself to work. Is aim low, maybe it's not permissible to withhold his wages. V'yashmin and oshko. If the Torah were to tell you they were allowed to hold back his wages, that's permissible. Mishum delo asaliyade, because he never had this money in his pocket. Aval gzelo, where you take money, you rob it from his pocket. The asaliyade aim low tzrich. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Hai lo solin pula socher itchad aboker. My ovidle. Right, Tanakama of our Mishnah used this pasuk to include rental agreements for Behem and Caleb, because it says itcha. Rabbi Yossi holds that rental payments are not subject to these prohibitions, which are found in the section of day workers in Parshas Kedoshim Sefer Yikra. My ovidle. He was hired to cut down one single cluster of grapes. Nevertheless, over mishum bal tolin, there still is a violation of withholding wages. Ve'idach, what about Tanav Mishnah? How does he derive that same law that even if someone was hired to cut down a cluster of grapes, there is baltolin? He derives it ve'elav who nosei es nafshe. Right. So at the end of the pasuk, it says in Sefer Dvarim, ve'elav who nosei es nafshe. Dover moser nafshel olav. Anything that an employee would commit his life, a short job is also included. And that leads us to Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph Idach. What about the other Tana? Not the Tana Rabbi Yossi, but the first Tana. He needs it for what's derived in the Brisa of Elov. who nosias nafsho b'nei ola zebekevesh. Why did the worker climb up a high ramp to work? Or he suspends himself from a tree in order to collect the fruits. He puts himself into mortal danger. Lo scharo. Wasn't it because of his wages? Dover acher, v'elav hu nosias nafsho, kol hakovesh, schar socher ki ilu notel nafsho b'men. Anyone who withholds the wages of an employee, it's as if he took his life from him. So here we'll stop here with Rav Huna and Rav Chizda on Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amid Aleph. Thank you very much.